Okay, 1995 Holden Rodeo, made by Isuzu. 430,000 kilometre oil change. I change the oil every 5,000 kilometres or 3,000 miles, and I've never had any problems with engines wearing out. Another reason for that is I never abuse an engine. I never over rev it. I do use acceleration, but at low revs. Okay, it's 2.6 engine. I don't know if I've mentioned it before in this video, but it's a 1995 motor car. I can highly recommend the mid-1990s machinery. This is fuel injected. It's my first fuel injected car, and this car's been great. There's a few issues. I had a dirty mass airflow sensor here. I cleaned that, and she ran well. I exchanged, it did have a hesitation problem, but I exchanged out the spark plugs, leads, rotor cap, and fuel injectors, and then I decided in my wisdom to spray oil in here to collect the dust, because I've already, I beg your pardon, I've always had carburetor engines, and that must have put a bit of oil on the mass airflow sensor, so that confused the issue. But yeah, ever since then, renewing the leads, plugs and everything, mass airflow sensor, it's like driving a new car. From memory, the only other problems were a worn out electric generator and a fuel pump. I was able to catch the fuel pump before a breakdown because I've got a fuel pressure gauge, and that should sit on in between 40 and 45 psi. So at idle it should be at 40, and if you rev it, it should go up to 45. And week by week or day by day it was becoming less pressure, so I knew what the problem was, and I replaced the fuel pump, and that fixed it. The electric generator here, that didn't lead to a breakdown. What happened there was in the cab I've got a battery gauge. That's it there, and I was able to see that it was sitting on 12 volts even when the engine was revved. Now under normal driving conditions it should be on 12 volts, and then when you're driving along or revving the motor it should be at 14, so it should be around about there if you rev it. So in between those two points there. Just make sure that your brake pads don't wear out too much. If they wear out too much, I think there's a possibility that it could lead to or possibly have symptoms of a stuck rotor, or a stuck caliper I should say. Yeah, this video is only for entertainment purposes. I can only tell you my experiences with the car. Just like to add that one of the rear wheels is chocked, so that's for safety. So anyway, I have replaced one caliper on this car. Replacing the fuel injectors on this engine, what I did was I just removed all of this intake. And that's the rail. That's the rail, and underneath that rail is the fuel injectors. So you get everything off, you provide access, you undo the rail, you slip the fuel injectors on there, you put a bit of, say for instance, grease or something for sealing. When you bolt this down, it seals the injector in between the engine and this fuel rail there. Over the years I've replaced the hydraulic oil, the brake oil. Whatever you do, don't forget your clutch fluid as well. Just there, try and focus that. The timing belt was replaced just before I bought it. I bought this at 170,000 kilometres, I beg your pardon, 270,000 kilometres, and it's now got 430,000 kilometres. If this car makes it to 500,000 kilometres, I'll put a new timing belt on it and put it into storage and get a new vehicle. I'm not sure, I think it's got possibly an exchange radiator. You can have a look at it, see what you think. I can try and get that to focus. It's an aluminium one. And anyway, it runs very cool. It could have a cool running thermostat, and I highly recommend that. Part of the yearly, we'll call it a roadworthy, here in New South Wales, I do things like cleaning the air filter, the mass airflow sensor. There's a number of things on the list. There should be a video somewhere on my channel. I've treated the rust. Any rust I've painted with black rust paint, and then you can paint over that with white rust paint if you want. I'm just looking around the ute. Okay, so it's got a good car seat cover. There was a rip and a tear, worn out area here. What I did was I got some material, like a t-shirt or what have you, put silicone on that, silicone on the underneath of the material, and push it down, and that's a good repair for that. There was a door latch that came undone, and there's a video on that somewhere, and I just removed the cover and put that back together. Just looking through now, there wasn't really anything on the inside of the car that needed repair. Just really some rust issues, the fuel pump. The wheel nuts have been binding because I know they have to tighten them up to very high specs these days. So I haven't put them on, but I've got a new bag of wheel nuts. One of these guards came loose, and I put like self-tapping screws to hold it back up. I got hit from behind, so I put a third brake light in. That's it there, it's just a cheap one. Got the electrics going up to that, it's protected by a plastic cover. Yeah, nothing really else. I put a good reverse light on it. Oh, there was some rust on the frame, and I used like the method of just spraying it with rust paint, and I used silver because that's what I used to use. Now I'd use black. The diff is a little bit worn, or the linkages there. It just makes a bit of a clunk noise when I'm changing gears, but I'm a careful driver, so yeah. But I don't know if it's in the diff or the linkages there. I'll put say $70. I'll buy the cheap fuel. I'm now working in an area below Parramatta where there's cheap fuel. Look, I'll put the fuel price, you say $1.30, I'll fill up the tank, and I'll go to work and back, say 6 days, and work is about say 85 kilometres each day. It's not pretty, but it's driven past a lot of new Mercedes and Jaguars and what have you, broken down on the side of the road. Yeah, it's been a tradie car and a work car, and I've changed occupations. And the only complaint I've got this about it is about the comfort of driving it. It's got leaf springs in the back and torsion bars on the front, so I'll just show you. So there your standard leaf springs. And your torsion bars. We come down underneath the car, and that's the torsion bar system there. Bar runs right through. And it's just the bending of metal that's your suspension. And plus you've got a shock absorber. Running up there. Okay, so if you're still watching, or if you've fast forwarded through to now, let's get on with it. I'll just undo the drain plug underneath the engine, undo the cap a little bit for the airflow. This car's been taken for a drive, so the engine's warm, the oil's warm. The only different or controversial thing about my oil changes with this engine is possibly that I changed the oil filter every 10,000. So every second oil change I change the oil filter. In my defence, I would say something like, I don't rev this engine, I don't drive it fast, it's not a high performance situation, and I just don't believe that the metal filings would be generated. And because I change the oil every 5,000 kilometres, then I think that that's okay. If you want to change the oil filter, as you should, if you change the oil any more than 5,000 kilometres, then there it is underneath. It turns off on a thread. It's not easy to get off. I've got a number of different types of oil filter removal tools. What you can do in an extreme situation is you can drive a big screwdriver into it, tap it in with a hammer, or smash it in with a hammer and try and move it, but that's only last resort. Otherwise you can buy, say for instance, the larger version of this. You might be able to get a grip onto it and turn it. Or you've got a tool like this. You can put the chain around the oil filter and you attach it back here. I'm not exactly sure how to use this. I don't think I've really ever used it, or not often anyway. And then you can turn it, it'll lock onto it, and you can turn it off. One of the main situations about getting an oil filter off is the actual working area. This one's a good one. You know, it's got an adjustable width, and you can crank down on it like that. But yeah, ideally you should change your oil filter when you change your oil. Okay, so having said that, let's make a start. So just undo the cap a bit, go under here. I've got a spinner. So there's the sump, the oil drain pan, we'll call it. The nut is just there, so give that a focus. So let's see, it should be back toward me with a bit of luck. So yeah, she's fairly tight. Okay, so I'll undo that. As I've said, the oil's warm, so let that drain out. Okay, so go and grab a nice cup of coffee or a tea or whatever, and then we'll put that nut back in the underneath of the engine. Okay, you can watch South Main Auto Repair replace an engine in a Chevy truck. So all those smoky cars going down the road and putting poisonous fumes into the air, that's because either they haven't changed their oil and it's got old, or it's got low, and another possibility is in the past they've lost their radiator coolant or something and it's overheated and destroyed the engine. So now it's time to put the oil back in. Okay, the next step is to put the oil back in. So you have to do your own research as to what oil you're going to use, what viscosity, what type of oil, and the amount of oil. This is the oil I use. I can't tell you what oil to use, but for this car I've been using this oil for a long time. It's a little controversial because it is diesel engine oil. Okay, it's not the diesel fuel oil that you put in your fuel tank in a diesel. It's the engine lubrication oil. And also another thing about it is it's 60 weight. The diesel oil seems to work well in this car. The 60 weight is going to be too heavy for a lot of especially newer engines and engines with sensors for the computer to run the engine. The only thing I'd say would be that this is a fairly hot climate here. It's not like the USA or Canada, especially Canada. It's like a semi-tropical area, and so we don't get the low temperatures that other places get. But anyway, for this particular car, 1995 Holden Rodeo, we'll say, this oil has been good. But do your own research. Say, for instance, if you've got a viscosity rating recommendation of say 30, 1030 or what have you, then you're better off working close with that 30 rating. But yeah, I've found this oil to be good. Okay, so I know that without an oil filter change it's 4 litres, and with a oil filter change it's a bit more, so let's get to it. Okay, I've made sure I've cleaned the container. You cannot get any grit or dirt or anything in with the oil. It's got to be spotless and clean, just like you're going to say, for instance, a cup that you drink out of. It's got to be similar in cleanliness. So you want to make sure that you find out how much oil your engine takes. But for this engine, I'm going to fill this up 1 litre at a time, times 4. So I'll fill it up 4 times and put it in the engine. Every time I fill it up, I'll put something on the ground so that I know for sure how many times I've filled it. Okay, so let's put the cap back on, and we'll start it up and check the dipstick, and we'll see where we're at. Yeah, so the car's on a level surface, so we'll just let it sit for however long you think it'll take for the oil to drip back down into the back of the bottom of the engine oil drain pan. So maybe a couple of minutes, right? So just play another game of darts or whatever. Okay, so check the dipstick. So clean it, put it in and take it out, and I'd say the oil's up to there and the full mark is there, so we'll just let it sit a bit longer and the oil might come up to here. So there it is there. Okay, yeah, I think that's it. So I'll just try and focus that. So the top hole is full, so we can see that's it's a good level. Okay, so just get your old oil and put it in the old oil container. Okay, so the main things to check is that the sump plug underneath the engine that you took out to drain the oil, make sure that's reinstalled or put back in. Make sure that the cap on top of the engine is put back on and the dipstick's in place. Okay, so good to go, and drive safely and carefully, go with the flow, and there's no reason why you shouldn't get $500,000 out of your car too, so long as you change the oils in the gearbox, oil, engine and the other oils. If your car has an interference engine, you need to make sure that your timing belt is new.